And we are back here again once on Living in the 21st Century. Joining me today is former Transportation Minister of the Ukraine, Vasyl Chapchenko. Vasyl, it's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Likewise. So I have some news. Here's the thing. I heard recently Russia's President, Putin, had been stating that the Ukraine had drone attacked his capital and having attacks on civilian houses. Now, we both know that ain't really true, but could you explain a little bit more about that?
To be honest, I'd say that since Russia's invasion, Ukraine have had more than 700 full-scale attacks. And last month, we have about 20 air attack by missiles from Russia Federation, and they decided to eliminate or maybe to demonstrate that they have opportunity to launch missiles, and they are all people around the world can see that they are targeting civilians, residential houses, and trying to kill civilians. For example, yesterday they killed in Kiev 3 persons. It was mother with young 2 daughters, and it's part of missiles which was intercepted by Ukrainian forces. I think it was air defense system Patriot, and part of these missiles fell at them while they were going to shelter. And I'm surprised that they were trying to discuss it in Russia's social nets and social media that they achieved results, and we know that their results it's to kill people.
Yes.
And yes, sorry.
Sorry. Do you think this is a next scheme from President Putin to use other military exercises like nuclear, so you have something to make it justifiable to launch nuclear attacks on Ukraine? Could that be?
He can do it, but now we discussed it maybe a couple months ago that they could launch Ukraine city by tactic missiles, but we know that tactic missiles can be carried different way. First of all, if they use middle range or long range missiles, these missiles will be intercepted, and all people around the world understand that these missiles will be intercepted by Ukraine air defense system for more than 95%. And it means that he must launch a lot of missiles to target civilian Ukrainian city. But I don't think that they have this number of missiles in their disposal, because first of all, you know that they decided to check the conditions of their missiles after information about readiness these missiles to be launched, because we know that most of these missiles was produced in Ukraine, and since 2015 these missiles didn't serve by Ukrainians specialists after they provoked conflict in the west part of Ukraine and captured Ukraine peninsula Crimea. And they could use tactical missiles. It can be launched from ordinary artillery systems, and Ukraine forces will manage to detect moving nuclear material and will be ready, because distance for military artillery system is about 40 kilometers, 40 or 50 kilometers, and they will not be able to cover Ukraine's territory. And the same time, we know that Ukraine forces have opportunity to intercept and to shoot Russia's planes, which could carry missiles or bombs from air base, from their aircrafts. And I think now their opportunity are limited.
Okay. Do you think, I heard recently that Putin has stepped up more military intensity on Kyiv. Is that so?
To be honest, I can comment that according to information from official sources, Ukraine's military, their attempt to offense further Ukraine territory are weakening. First of all, they decided to exchange their troops in the Bakhmut, because they wanted to demonstrate that they managed to capture the city, but Ukrainian forces now half surrounded the city and holding under control west and south part of this city outskirts. And the Ukraine forces have opportunity to control artillery control above Bakhmut, and there was four main direction, and they wanted to start new local offensive operation in at the north, at the Kupiansk city and Vuhledar city. They want to demonstrate that they have opportunity to attack, because they think that Ukraine is at the of offensive operation.
Yeah. So before, Bakhmut was under the capture of the Russians, and Ukraine was planning an offensive move to recapture Bakhmut. At this point, you are saying that their plan worked, is that they now have Bakhmut surrounded and taken back?
They have commented that Bakhmut was captured many times, but they haven't done it.
Okay.
And Ukraine force, this city was surrounded by private army formed from mercenaries, and they were they were sending the prisoners who were weared in military uniform, and they were moving 10 or 20 meters a day, and they commented that it was great offensive operation, but it's only regional district city, and they are not big distance. And Ukraine forces, after threat to lose the city, managed to drive them away from city and eliminated enemy's Russian forces at the north and south flanks, and now continues holding suburbs the city, because to stay in the city isn't necessary for Ukrainian forces, because they are fully eliminated all residential houses. They are not water, food, and quite difficult to provide military forces in this city. And Ukraine forces decided to hold half-surrounded city just to have opportunity to eliminate them from artillery, because it's Ukraine forces control hills around the city from the south and west part of this location. And they decided, we have heard a lot of comments that they decided to exchange Wagner military groups mercenaries for regular troops, Russia's army. And now they are doing it, and we heard from Russia's mercenary speakers that Russia forces mind the way for Russia's mercenary army opportunity to leave the city, because they want to eliminate these criminals and volunteers who formed this mercenary army. And Ukraine forces are holding our territory and haven't moved back for any meters, and managed to move from both sides for more than 20 kilometers, and managed to retake dozens of square kilometers around Bakhmut.
Beautiful. One question I ask you: do you have any ideas of how the Russian people now view the Ukrainian war with Russia? Do you think they are supportive with President Putin, or do you think they're against what President Putin is doing?
To be honest, quite difficult to forecast their view, because I'd say that in Russia Federation there are not any independent sources of information, and they have only Russia's governmental control propaganda they are spreading for them. For example, they are commenting that they are fighting against NATO country in Ukraine, and that started their so-called military operation because of threat from NATO countries. And then they we remember when at the Bali Island meeting, foreign affairs ministers comments who told that it's Ukraine decided to capture Russia Federation, and they are defending their territory. And then they decided to include, to so-called Russia Federation for Ukrainian region and decided to comment that now it's Russia's territory. It's a type of war, and Russians believe this propaganda's ideas and haven't had any honest information. And now I think maybe a couple days ago we saw that in Russia Federation, in the close to Ukraine's border, appeared Russia's insurgent movement, Russia's insurgent army, who decided to fight against Putin regime, and part of them served in Ukraine army, but they were part of International Legion, who's fighting for Ukraine independence and integrity, and going to have their home independence and opportunity to defeat Russia's army and to persuade Russians that they are living under dictatorship. And now all people know that that Russia Federation has bad consequences. Their offense operation, and they are started selling gold from their reserves, state reserves, because their reserves is formed from gold, is formed from China's yuan currency and euro. There are a lot of China's yuan
Beautiful.
reserves.
Right. Yeah. One thing I want to ask you is what you think is the psychology of the Ukrainians right now, both local at home and international? Do they still have a positive outcome on this war, that Ukraine eventually will come out victorious?
To be honest, we know that Ukraine is interested to drive Russia's military units, different types, from Ukraine, and Ukraine forces and every Ukrainians will do our best to do it. But we know that without Russia's regime collapse, we will have this type of danger for all countries around the world. And all European countries understand it, that they can start their offensive operation after they are recovered, after heavy casualties in Ukraine war. It's type of state. They try to demonstrate that Russia is empire. They have empire rhetoric. And we must understand that they are commenting their interest around the world, because they have really powerful propaganda's machine, and they have enough resources to spread the lie around the world. And sometimes we can see in different countries their followers, they can comment that they, for example, can support peace agreement or ceasefire in Ukraine, because they don't understand that to sign ceasefire or peace agreement, it means that they will have opportunity to persuade the territory they have captured, it's Russia's territory, and it will influence and will encourage another dictatorship around the world. For example, we know that China's representative visited Ukraine and had the negotiation with Ukraine officials, and he was commenting only ways that he can support the so peace around the world. But what it means, no one knows.
Okay. One thing, do you think at this time or at any given time, do you think the Ukraine at this time can penetrate beyond the borders right now of Russia? Could they, do they have any form and means of mounting an offense into Russia opposed to waiting until missiles come across their borders to shoot them down? And if not, how would you prefer to see the international world allies, American allies, operate in terms of giving adequate weapons that can go beyond the borders of Ukraine to minimize more damages that you are now encountering?
First of all, to answer for this questions, I'd comment that Russia Federation has formed a different strategy, for example, for penetrating this different sphere. Now we can comment that they have a big influence in United Nations framework. Because, for example, they managed to stop export from Ukraine grain. You know that Ukraine is one from the biggest producers grain for around the world, and they managed to stop it. And there was signed so-called grain agreement, and they could allow transport Ukraine grain in exchange of opportunity to have free and without problems selling Russia's grain around the world. And they are chantage poor countries, African countries, for their support in United Nations framework, and they want to trigger limits of food around the world, just to demonstrate that Russia is big player, and that they big producer fertilizers for producing grain around the world. And after Ukraine forces manage to drive them from Ukraine's territory, first of all, it will be quite difficult, and we know that we will pay for it many our citizens' lives, and it will be quite difficult to us. And because of it, Ukraine forces are being drilled and equipped to have opportunity to do it. And after that, we know that Russia Federation will not be destroyed and will not collapse nearest future. And it means that in the world will exist danger country, so-called big North Korea, which will be threatening all their neighbors by weapon. And because of it, I think that Russians understand it, and this insurgent movement which appeared in the western region of Russia Federation demonstrates that in Russia there are people who has different idea who's interested in good relations with different countries and who's interested in new order for Russia Federation. But Russia Federation must be rebuilt and must maybe limited in opportunity to use nuclear weapon and must be punished for all they have done in Ukraine, because there are a lot of crimes they have committed in Ukraine against civilians, and they continuing doing it. And we know that if we didn't have Western air defense system, our cities would look like Bakhmut today. We know that if you see Bakhmut from the sky, you will see that there are only ruins. It was a beautiful little city, and they fully eliminated it. And they, for example, now copied United States technology, flying bombs for half ton and from half to 2 tons, and they tried to launch it from the Russia's territory, and sometimes these bombs are falling Russia's cities, and they are eliminating Russians, and for military forces haven't received enough experience how to use and how to direct it, and their targets are not Ukraine military. For example, we think that war it's fighting army, but Russia decided to fight against every Ukrainians. Every Ukrainian.
Well, Vasyl, thanks so much. We have come to the last few seconds of the show. It was a pleasure having you on, as usual. And to all those who have been tuning in on Living in the 21st Century, I want to say have a happy day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Happy Saturday.